Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Kenning, can you hear this upstairs? Testing, testing the microphone. Perfect. And then I just want to make sure he can hear on the Zoom. Let's see.
Since it's a small group, we'll just do the tree right here.
Okay, perfect. Let me get the little and then another thing that Stephen wanted me to ask you about was if you think we have a few minutes for me to set up the live stream at the cemetery.
Oh, sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
had mentioned you wanted to lower right away and was worried that you wouldn't want me to take a few minutes
No,
to set up.
it's what, it's just, it's his mom, Glory, she's got that, she's got, she's thinking about time.
So cool.
Absolutely, we'll send our cards, and you say it's ready, then we can.
Perfect.
But we'll need to, I don't think we have enough for one day.
So Jay Siegel and his crew will be available to help us. Absolutely.
So I don't think you need to film that.
Okay.
They can bring that out and we set it up. And while normally we would not do cottage here, we would only do that in the burial.
Right.
Because most people don't deal with it, but do it in the world.
Okay. Are we doing Kriya before the service? Okay. So if there's any that don't
Yeah, I don't think we need to.
okay, perfect.
It's really good. Glory and Stephen, and the others are.
Okay. Do you want a water?
Yeah, sure.
I hope I'm here. You're Stephen's kid, right? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, this is Robin Rice. He's really nice.
the use gives us speed.
Yeah.
So this, here's all the chairs.
Yeah, I did not do that all.
I give out a copy.
Oh, okay, thank you. Where is it? I'm gonna keep you some time. Carolyn, I will grab a line. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, you're gonna start school because I'd rather have you.
Is that what you said, whatever you want?
So check is that, but if you want to.
That's why I'm
Yeah, so don't worry about any of it.
all right. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so.
A little bit more.
I'm not going to throw myself in.
And just confirm that we will certainly take time so that we can set up the video in the cemetery as well. And one of the things that.
Yeah, she and Maggie and mine.
And Stephen, it looks like we won't need your laptop.
Okay,
I've
good,
got
because I realized
everything.
that I left my speech probably someplace I didn't, it was meeting, so I've got it written here.
Oh, okay. If you want me to print it, if you can email it to me, would anyone like a water? Would you guys like a water? Yeah, I'll take one. You're welcome. You want one too? We've got restrooms just back here, just go over.
I was gonna ask you that next. I need more of those and I hear them.
We have 3, so please have at it.
Okay.
And then when our speakers on Zoom are ready, we'll be able to see them on here and we'll hear them overhead.
Okay,
It's mine.
I'm gonna give them a call, let them make sure that, and then I just emailed it over to you with my 2 things.
Perfect.
maybe
I'll
we
make
can
print
that.
it.
So when you go to the screen from there.
It turns out they've got one over there too, I guess, so that I'm making easier.
No, you know.
All right, kiddos, you get.
Yeah, we'll go through that one, but, well, the service starts right at, right, the service starts at 1. I thought what we did, first was the trio. We had the road and roll, that's good. And tomorrow, the tree is something with parents. And, yeah, with all the things that you want to express, you realize immediately that this may actually say people that there is a limit to it. Our ability to express. And so the ancient world is, you don't always get time to do it. I do gestures. Sometimes those gestures like, or just, we can't do that right now, right? You can't even make a smile.
Yeah.
But one of the things we did was, just a simple, not just, but tiny thought. It's symbolic of people. What kind of illusion of maybe work and almost 40 years. And, you know, you get and the person who left the most knowledge, you're getting the whole community.
Boy, and you know, you're good. And it is our law.
I need the why. So the act of tearing is symbolic of the tearing, right? Tear, when they will tear. Right, in the old days, it meant Belmont said, they would actually tear up the tower. They're not going to make a great, people that look at it all the time, you tear it and that's good. But in the modern world, we have a wardrobe, instead of going through there and tearing all your clothes, should you, should have. So instead of doing this, this daddy, this is very fun. You, now, you're going to go on the other side. Well, and your right side. See, we put it over this part, right? Right? You, mom, or dad. So, ready? Go ahead, put it on, and then stand up with them. There's something you say. Okay. Oh, no, this is fine. Stand, stand, stand.
You know, first guys that,
Everyone please stand up. Yeah, come on over here. When you see the little cut, put your fingers on each side of the cut.
oh, oh.
All right, now, so the idea.
So Michelle's gonna speak, and then there's another person after Michelle at the end.
Yeah, what I'm expecting is that my mom will be first, and then I will, and then Michelle, and then Steve.
Okay, wonderful. And do Michelle and Steve know their order?
Michelle and I mentioned it.
Okay.
I mentioned Steve, I should probably mention that.
Yeah, and obviously Michelle's on the call. Steve has not tuned in yet.
She was, really just fantastic before we even knew that she was still there. They were just that bad. And we did know, that she had already put a lot of things together, opportunities for, anyway, she just couldn't make it back here as she had more. She just got out of quarantine.
Oh, wow.
Just, she lived in Chicago, and you look at the national map, and we got, quarantine for 2 weeks.
Well, I'm sure glad that she could be here like this.
Yeah.
Please feel free to sit down. You always end up on the free.
Get yourself comfortable. We'll start in a few minutes when everyone's ready. Absolutely, I'll be right back.
It is, yeah, down here.
Yeah. Where are the waters? Go. Okay.
For glory's sake.
That's okay, I love it the way it looks. I know,
Oh, please.
it's appropriate for you to. Whatever favors you may have. Maybe all of the people tonight. But here it looks. Oh. Yeah, it's real.
And Stephen and Gloria, if you're gonna, when you speak, as I will in a moment, go ahead, we'll take our mask off when we are actually speaking here so people can see, and it's a lot easier to communicate.
I just advised somebody yesterday that they can't breathe with this thing.
Oh.
I think it was you. And I said, just get a darning needle and put a little tiny hole in it. Yeah, but then that doesn't protect you from the world. But with an asthmatic, I looked it all online and it said, you can't wear it so much. But I'm not that bad and I watched it.
Well, we want you to be comfortable.
I think comfortable and came quickly.
Just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phones before we start. Do we want to wait for Steve to join? Is that who Britain's Clark is?
Yeah, Brooklyn Clark is, his son.
Okay.
And then we're, and so the camera over here is already aimed at.
Yeah, so
Work.
if you can see this up here, this is Rabbi View and Casket, so I'll go ahead and switch to that to be the main view. Instead of Michelle. So you can see it, but hopefully we'll have to go with Michelle
Are we all ready? Okay. So we say Bruchim Habaim B'Shem Adonai. Glory and Stephen and Fatima and all the
kids and loved ones who are here, and it's limited. We only have fewer than 10 who are here with us as we say our goodbyes and pay respect for Dave Weisberg. And many of us knew him as a friend, as a wonderful part of our community, but our hearts go out especially to his family, those who loved him. And Gloria would have been in February this coming year. It would have been 40 years of marriage. And so again, for those who are here, and of course those who are online, we say, Bruchim habeim, blessed are you. We're here to do a very difficult but sacred task, and that is to honor Dave's memory and to make sure that he's laid to rest with dignity and respect. And to honor his memory means also to remember some of the wonderful parts about his life that will always be with you. And so as we honor him, we'll be sharing some of the prayers, and I printed out some of the prayers that you can follow here. And I know that Stephen and the family also emailed a PDF to others. So just imagine, even though you're online, imagine that you're right here with the whole family. Shaviti Adonai lenagdi tamid, ki mamini balamot, לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לבטח, כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא תיתן חסידך לראות שחד. The psalmist said, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exalt and my soul rejoices. My being is secure. You will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. A sense of enduring happiness, of living on, is also repeated in a psalm we're going to read later on in just a few moments. Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And it's not as if they were unaware of the fact that we have our mortal ends, but rather our ancestors wished for us to emphasize that which carries on. And that's you, because the love that we create doesn't end just with our mortal journey. The love that you create, the people that you've had an influence and an impact on, they will carry that sense of your neshama, your soul. And so that's the enduring happiness. Even in the last more difficult years that Dave struggled with, he knew how blessed he was to have a loving wife. And Gloria, you are Gloria in more ways than one for him. And Stephen and Michelle and others, you gave him what he wanted more than anything, that sense of family. And gosh almighty, there's nothing that can compare to the grandkids. And that's what lifts your heart, and to say, you know what, though I'm coming to my journey's end, what I cared about most will not end. You gave him that peace. You gave him that gift. So read with me on the first page. We'll read responsively. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So that's 23rd Psalm that I mentioned is on that very next page. I want to read it in Hebrew. It's traditional to have the sense and the sound of those words wash over, and then we'll read it together in English. Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo eksar binot deshi yarbitzeni, amen min chod yanchaleni, nafshi yoshovev, yancheni, b'magalei tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ke'elek b'geitzim mavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishentecha hema yanachamoni. Ta'aroch lefanai shochan neged torarai, deshanta v'shemen roshi, kol siur ovaya, ach tov v'chesed yedofone kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamin. Let us read together in English, a Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God enables me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in paths of righteousness for the sake of the divine. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, is traditionally read also during the service because it speaks of the stages of our life from childhood to old age. And it makes a connection between the stages of our life to the stages of the seasons. That there is a zman, a time for every experience under heaven. Let's read together. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for grieving and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking, a time for losing, a time for keeping, a time for letting go, a time for tearing, like that kriya we just tore, that tear in our cloth, and a time for sewing, a time for silence, because we can't find any words adequate to share, and a time for speaking, because we can't say goodbye to our loved one without first sharing words of tribute. And I'm going to share a few words, and then Gloria and Stephen, you're going to share a few, and then we'll have some people online also. As we are in the middle of the Hanukkah festival, we celebrate the symbolism of light over darkness, virtue over corruption, and hope over despair. When the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed some 2,200 years ago, our ancestors could have resigned themselves to defeat and begin the slow process of disappearing into history. Instead, they fought on. They fought on against all odds, and they defeated those who would have eliminated us. Our ancestors rebuilt that temple and rededicated it on these very days. It was a Chanukhat Habayit, a rededication of the temple. It's from that word, Chanukhat Habayit, that we get the festival's name, Hanukkah. For those days until these, we remember that loss, setback, and the occasional defeat are all a part of life. What defines us is how we react to those losses and those setbacks. The message of Hanukkah is that as long as a family and the community refuses to quit, we will not only survive, but we will thrive. As long as we hold dear the precious legacy of our Jewish faith and the love of our family and heritage, then the sacred covenant that will be renewed and will be a blessing to yet another generation of our people will persevere. That indomitable spirit, this pride of faith, family, nation, and heritage was at the heart of the soul and the being and the interest of David Weisberg. He was a man of extraordinary brilliance. I call him a rocket scientist, although Stephen, you could say, well, it's more graphic. But his first job with the U.S. Army, with the Navy, was with rocket guidance. So I can call him a rocket scientist, for God's sakes. And he was a man who held his family and especially his cherished glory at the heart of his life, which is his greatest achievement. David was born and raised in Portland, Maine, the son of Louis and Blanche. David adored his sisters, Franny and Gloria, both of whom have passed away some years ago. He attended Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and earned his bachelor's and master's in civil engineering, the Tau Beta Pi membership ranking David in the first 50 in his class of MIT. He immediately served in the United States military for computer graphics pertaining to missile guidance systems. David worked his entire career in the computer graphics industry for computer-aided design, manufacturing, and engineering. And I'm going to read all of these initials, Stephen, that you wrote for us because I have no clue what they mean actually. CAD, CAM, and CAE. With the exception of a few years in the middle for his hobby store, which he started, that's where he devoted his life. After working at Auto Troll for many years in Colorado, he concluded his career with his own newsletter business for 8 years in Greenwood Village. And after selling his business, David devoted his time to charitable organizations, including becoming the first male president of the Cancer League of Colorado. So as I mentioned in about a moment, Gloria and you and Stephen and Michelle and Steve will all share some words, but I just want to mention that his connection with Temple Sinai also began about 40 years ago. He had met and fallen in love with Glory, and they were married by Rabbi Zwerin in the old Sinai building, married on February 17th, 1981, just a couple of days after Valentine's Day. When my family came to Temple Sinai, about 2005, Dave and Glory, you were among the warmest to welcome us. Indeed, I'll always treasure that easy smile and encouragement and patience, both from Dave and from Gloria. It's rare to find those who are able to combine intellectual brilliance with a warm and loving heart. But as everyone who knows Dave Weisberg will attest, he was one of those gentle souls who was gifted with the sensitivity to know when he should give space to allow those he truly loved to find their own identity, and also when to open his arms and embrace others with love in order to call them his own. Like that miraculous cruse of Hanukkah oil that brightened the ancient temple, David's light will continue to shine and bring light to all who have known and loved him. When we say his name, we say Zichrono Livracha. May he always be remembered as a blessing. So Stephen, would you like to go first, or you want Gloria to go first? Yes, that way they can see you and you can be heard.
I need,
There you're going to be.
I've lost 3 inches. There we go. Thank you. Dave Weisberg was the love of my life. This compassionate, intelligent man was supposed to live longer than me. And as his medical challenges grew in recent months, his love sustained. Neither of us never really considered that his battle with his colon was beginning to snatch his energy until an infection spread his suffering that consumed him. And so it came to be that what seemed to be a 3-hour routine physical exam in our living room became a place where his imminent survival came to question for the first time. Simply told to take his father to the Sky Ridge ICU, Stephen left home with Dave never to return. I never even got to give him a last hug before he left. Again, this was not supposed to happen to him. Now the raw cold outside isn't even a match for the sudden chill in my heart, in the heart of Stephen and Dave's children. There's a saying that love is friendship caught fire. One summer in about 1981, several of us Jewish single women sat by the pool, focusing on how awful the Jewish Community Center JCC singles were. Many more women showed up than men, and some of the men were not our cups of tea, if you know what I mean. So us girls decided to start our own Jewish singles group with an equal number of men and women on our roster. Someone we knew and liked as a friend of the opposite sex was invited to a planning meeting in the back room at the Denny's on Leetsdale and South Monaco. Dave and I met at that first planning meeting. Our first event was in my backyard, a reception after the high holiday services were over. Each guest was to bring their own booze. As the sun set, cans and bottles piled up in a trash bin. Dave took the heavy cans and bottles home to his condo and dumped them in a dumpster. Oh, I never had to deal with that. How funny it was for us to notice that we had matching navy blue Thunderbirds. A match made in heaven, perhaps. At one of our group's other parties, I asked Dave, "Why haven't you asked me out?" Stunned and on the spot, did ask me out. At one of the first outings, we had a picnic at a park, and it was there during a Frisbee and food, Stephen and Liz clicked with them. And so Dave and I got married at Temple Sinai and went on a 2-week honeymoon in Hawaii. Dave's daughter, Michelle, then 19, stayed with the kids. Upon returning, we were sitting and having some champagne in the living room when Stephen and Liz came downstairs and asked Dave if he would adopt them. And so the four of us became the Weisberg family. Years later, Stephen married Fatima Diaz and are blessed with daughters Eden and Sari. Liz is married to Lee Young, and they have 3 children, Benjamin, Jordan, and Zachary Young. They live in San Diego, as does Dave's son, Stephen, also spelled with a PH. So. And chef Corey, yes, she is, and their 2 sons, Griffin and Kellen. In recent years, empty nesters, we'd go to lunch on Sunday afternoons after Sunday school with Sari and Eden until the virus stopped us. But now we settle for Zoom Sunday afternoons together. I remember how Dave used to grasp my left hand and would mouth a very quiet "thank you," meaning thank you for each Sunday afternoon. These words spoken to him as we pulled away from Stephen and Fatima's home with the girls. Also lately, I've been coming downstairs in the morning to see Dave engrossed in the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal. I would come up behind him, sling my arms around him from the back, and kiss his beautiful grayed head. I go on without Dave's brilliance, charm, gentle humor, a man that soaked up love like a sponge. I have my 2 wonderful girls I cherish. This morning, I looked out over our yard to the back fence where Dave used to rest in a red chair under the crabapple tree after potchkeying around in the flowers and plants in the backyard. I cannot watch his coffin be lowered into the ground as my lifelong serious asthmatic prevents it. So here I say goodbye to my buddy, my man, the love of my life, the husband of 38 years, David Erwin Weisberg. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Stephen Weisberg, or version 2. I'm going to skip the first paragraph as I didn't realize the rabbi was going to read the obituary, so we've covered Dad's career. We worked together. My father and I, we were among the first publishers on the nascent internet, but we stood out for being able to successfully charge access to it and not simply give it away as a lost leader. You know, it was my dad's longtime career dream that he was going to start an industry newsletter, hundreds of dollars a year in subscription fees to subscribers, and talk about the industry and have a chance to make an influence on the industry that he had worked in for the bulk of his career. And it was before the advent of the internet and then during the beginning of it. And he achieved a lot of satisfaction from doing that. And we know now for a lot of things in psychiatry and psychology that a big element of a man's happiness is often bound up in his career. You know, I mentioned we were among the first publishers. I was there full time for 2/3 of my dad's writing venture as an employee. And he assigned me the task of summarizing developments in computer hardware technologies that provided the platform for the major engineering software that he wrote about, CAD, CAM, and CAE. With his name, many doors opened and then nearly shut as the people I called realized they had mistaken a young pup for the experienced Dave Weisberg. Engineers as a group are generally not amenable to providing remedial training to the untrained, and it took a while to learn the fundamentals and develop methods of inquiry that stimulated the industry insiders to respond rather than dismiss or ignore. In that time, I got to know my father better, of course. Dad was not much of a teacher or a micromanager. He provided space and resources to figure things out, and he simply expected that good things would result. That was also how he was as a father and as a boss. He was a calm optimist, well-read, and a gentle conversationalist. Several years before his journalism venture, my mom re-entered the workforce as a journalist for a local weekly newspaper that many in the Denver area would know as The Villager. Her reporting activities soon changed direction from school board stuff to cover the greater Denver area charity, high society fundraising events that were disproportionately numerous in Denver compared to other cities of the same size. My dad accompanied her to many hundreds of events, and rather than become a wallflower, as he could have, being a quiet man, he became more social, and he really expanded into it. And over time, he directly became involved in a few charitable organizations with his time and money. A moment I was there to watch and was very proud of is when my father became the first male president of Cancer League Colorado. And, you know, he remained very involved with them up until really the end as a treasurer and, you know, just participating. Dad's family life was very modern in its complexity of prior marriages and children. After my mom and original father divorced, they both remarried to what became their lifelong partners, and they maintained friendly relations with each other. My first father, Al, had moved away to another state, and he received what he described to me later on as an incredible letter from David asking if he could take full responsibility for my sister and I by legally adopting us and not excluding him in the process. Permission was granted, and within just a few years, I began to visit Al and his wife, Lee. Some 9 years ago, David managed to have all of his children and grandchildren together in San Diego, California. My wife, Fatima, and I were the last couple to have children, but since we only lived 20 minutes away, David and Glory visited with my two daughters almost weekly since they were toddlers, relenting in their visits only as health matters required. In sum, Dad expected he would live into his 90s as his parents had, and while he escaped the current plague, he was felled by internal perforations and resulting infections that simply could not be repaired by our technology. During his final unconscious hours, I held his hand, I stroked his forehead, quietly cried, and I played back audio recordings when my children were but toddlers. He surprisingly opened his eyes for a long 10-second stare from which I could not discern anything. Afterwards, I sang several ancient Hebrew songs to him from memory, and then a few more that I had to look up spontaneously. David Weisberg helped improve this world that we live in, and he lived a full, complete life. Thank you.
Next, by way of the internet, Michelle, if you'll go ahead and share, I think you can unmute.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. D-A-V-E. You probably noticed that I spelled out Dave and not D-A-D. So I'll explain. My mom was married to Dave before Glory. They got married when I was 10, and then when I was 12, Dave legally adopted me. I remember as we were leaving court proceedings, the judge turned to me and asked, "So young lady, what name are you going to call him by?" And I thought for sure this was probably some sort of legal trick question. So I responded with the only name I knew him by. So I said Dave. Now I'm sure the judge probably thought I was going to say something like father or dad or some sort of variation like that. But I was always comfortable calling him Dave. And to Dave's credit, he nodded and seemed to understand. So even though I always considered him to be my dad, and he always considered me his daughter, I always called him Dave. He was like a famous person who only needed to use their first name, like Cher, Madonna, or Elvis, because everyone in my inner circle knew who Dave was. And like most daughters, I usually called Dave when I was either in trouble or needed some advice. I remember calling him when I had my first car accident, when I was 18 years old. And as soon as he answered the phone, I screamed hysterically. I've been in a car accident with a Pepsi truck. But even though he knew I was driving my brand new car, and I remember him very calmly asking me, "Are you okay?" And I'm guessing all he probably could hear between my gasp and tears was, "I don't know." So he very slowly and carefully said, "I'm on my way." And then I remember going into a very Zen-like state, which was probably shock, and proceeded to answer all the questions the police were asking me. Even though every time I looked over at that Pepsi truck, I could barely see my car, which was a tiny little Fiat X19 sitting underneath it. And I actually think I held it pretty together, that is, until I saw Dave. He was standing next to me, and that's when I knew I could finally let go and lose it, which I did. And then there was the time when I was in my 30s and on vacation with friends in Spain. We had just spent 5 days in Madrid, and the next leg of our journey was about to start. We had everything planned out perfectly. We were going to take a ferry over to Morocco and spend 3 days sightseeing, and then take a small commuter plane to Portugal so we could catch our international flight back to the US. But the day before we were going to leave Spain, we heard something was happening back in the US. The date was September 11th, 2001, 9/11. So there we sat in our hotel room, glued to our TV, trying to understand what was really going on. But the only channel we were able to get reception for, or could even understand, was the BBC. And they just kept rebroadcasting the same headline over and over again. So that's when I told everyone I would call Dave, because I knew he was smart, articulate, and a world traveler. He was going to be our Walter Cronkite. I asked him if he thought it was safe for us to travel to a Muslim country like Morocco. And he said, yes, you should be fine. And then proceeded to tell us all about the country and how it had always been a safe and friendly place for Americans to visit. But then the next morning, as we were starting to leave and check out of our hotel, I was handed a fax and an urgent phone message from Dave saying, do not go to Morocco. He told me later the reason he changed his mind was because there was still a lot of uncertainty about who the terrorists were and where they were from. But as it turned out, the whole country of Spain agreed with Dave, because they decided to close the border to Morocco overnight as a precaution. So even if we had tried to go, we wouldn't have been able to. So after all the years of calling Dave for help or advice, I was surprised when I got a call from him 4 weeks ago saying, Michelle, can you come to Denver? I need your help. And that's all it took for me to hear, except I had to figure out how I was going to get there from Chicago safely during the pandemic. Flying was not a risk I was willing to take, and neither was renting a car or staying in a hotel on the way. So I decided my best option was to drive my 20-year-old car with 250,000 miles on it straight through to Denver for 18 hours. And that's what I did. And all I can say is, I'm so grateful that he called and that I went. I was able to spend 10 days and nights visiting with him and helping him around the house, which turned out to be just a few days before he became so extremely sick that he was rushed to the hospital. While he was in ICU, I kept hearing myself thinking of the words he had sent to me in Spain. Don't go, don't go. Praying he would follow that same advice. But sadly for us, he's no longer here. But I believe instead he is at peace. So I hope whenever you hear me say Dave, you will know I am talking about someone who is not only an incredible good man, but someone who I really loved and will always miss, my dad, Dave.
Michelle, thank you. That was so beautiful. And now we're going to have Steve, if you will speak. Just unmute.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I actually didn't have much of a relationship with Dave until after I graduated college. I want to thank Glory for being the catalyst that made that relationship happen. With Glory's love and support, Dave and I were able to build a beautiful relationship as adults over the past 30 years. My wife, Corey, here with me today, had a big part in making that relationship work too. I guess the women in our family have more sense than the men. This was especially valuable to me as Dave and Glory became such loving grandparents to my two boys. They visited us often in San Diego, doing all the awesome grandparent things, like taking their kids to the zoo and the aquarium, out to the beach. They made the trip out to California often, and they were here for all the important life events. To his grandkids, Dave passed down a love of tech, a strong work ethic, an inquisitive nature, and dashing good looks. His strongest influence on Griffin and Kellen, my boys, has always been the importance of giving back and doing for others. Dave led an exemplary life of service for our kids to follow. And I just want to say that I wish that we were all there together so we could share this experience in person. But we'll just have to work hard through this pandemic to keep our relationships and to strengthen them through Dave and Glory. So.
Stephen, thank you so very, very much. Later on today, at 4:00 Mountain Time, we will have a Zoom Shiva, and it'll be an opportunity for everyone in a more informal way to share fun stories and memories and to pay tributes. But for now, we're going to conclude this part of the service with a few prayers, and I'll chant both El Malei Rachamim, which is a prayer makes reference to David's neshama, his soul, and his Hebrew name, David ben Yehuda Leib Ubrena, which will be a part of that. And something a little unusual, but I feel it's important to do it today, and that is that we will recite the Kaddish here as well as at the cemetery. Usually the Kaddish is just recited for the burial at the cemetery, but because of the difficulty with some people online and back and forth, we'll recite it both here and at the cemetery. And of course, again, we'll say it tonight on the Zoom Shiva. There's a meditation which I hope that you'll find meaningful. I certainly do. It's on page 3 of the handout. Would you please read it with me? Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage from birth to death to life everlasting. If you turn the page, you find the words to El Malei Rachamim. Again, it makes reference to the neshama, and the key words in it is that soul, that neshama that he has. Yitzro b'tzra hachayim et nishmato. His soul will be bound up in the bond of chayim, of life. It could also be understood that his soul is bound up with chayim, the living. And so we chant this knowing that all the people that we've loved and that love us They become a part of our essence, of our soul. That's what we talked about earlier today. You'll always be able to have Grandpa in your heart, in your soul. All you have to do is think of him. For now, if you're able, would you please rise? El Malei Rachamim Shochein Mamoromim Hamtzeh Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim V'Tohorim Kezohar Rakia Mazirim Et Nishmat David Yehuda Leib Uvrina Shalach Le'olamo Baal Bagan Eden Tihei Menuchato Lachein Baal Rachamim Yasirechu B'Sedek Hanafav Le'olamim V'Yitzro B'Tzro HaChayim Et Nishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. We say together, O God, exalted and full of compassion, we pray that you will grant perfect peace and eternal comfort in your sheltering presence to the soul of David Weisberg. God of mercy, protect his soul forever. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Adonai, you are his portion. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. The Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, are on the next page, page 5. We say, Yitgadal, v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma devarach rote, v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon, v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru, Amen. Yeh shemei rabba mevarach le'olam ul almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'tadar, v'tale, v'talal, shemei dekudasham b'richu, le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, de'amiram ba'alma, v'imru amen. Yeh shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu, v'akol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu, v'akol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Just one last meditation I'd like us to read. It's on that final page, page 6, as we read together. For the ties of love that death cannot sever, for the companionship we shared along life's path, for those gifts of heart and mind which have now become a precious heritage, for all this and more, we are grateful. Now help us, O compassionate God, not to dwell on sorrow and pain. Help us instead to find within our hearts the courage to return to the tasks of life and its joys. Amen. If you remain standing, now we're going to escort the coffin to the...
Yeah, so in just a moment, we're going to take the coffin over to the elevator and then over to the funeral coach, which is in the portico here. And I have directions to the cemetery in the foyer on the table. We don't have an escorted procession, so we'll all just obey traffic laws. We'll try to stay together, but that way you have directions.
was worried about that, where would I ever find it without a map? And then is there a ceremony when we, after that, we actually. Okay. Right, oh, 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 that would be great. And then maybe some, that would be wonderful. You guys listening to that?
So they don't, when you get a graveside, they don't do this thing, say, the one, the one date, time, the worst, whole thing, travel, family, friends, celebration of the You get a coat on, now we're gonna go.
And if anyone wants to use the restroom before we go, please do so. And I have directions to the cemetery here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. She's with them everything she says. She is the rider, the showmare who's going to ride the cemetery. It's a part of the cemetery requirement.
Oh.
Yes,
Oh,
just here to pay respect and
Okay.
her name is Naomi Miriam. She's a lovely lady. Would you like to have these go home with you or stay at the cemetery?
What is most Jewish people do?
Well, it's honestly kind of a mix.
Okay.
A lot of people like to have the flowers stay at the cemetery. And if you do so, I always recommend to take a few home with you as a memento. I'm very big into drying flowers. I know everyone isn't, but you might like to have that.
Yeah,
Why don't I take them out of the cemetery and then we can decide there if we want to keep them there or if you want me to pack them up.
Stephen?
I think having them there would be nice.
Perfect. And then this piece comes off the stand, so if you want, we can remove it or we can leave it on. But I will take it with us right now.
Okay, great. And then Stephen, with so many roses there, I've learned from experience in Liz's wedding that taking a large amount of flowers in the car, my car, then prevents an allergy I never had before.
There we
Yeah, that
go.
would be great.
Perfect. Alrighty.
And then the service itself is what, 45 minutes?
Which, at the cemetery?
Yeah.
Oh, probably just about not even 10 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah. So as soon as you're there, Rabbi said it's perfectly fine for me to go ahead and set up the live stream so that people can watch.
oh,
And then we'll just go
oh,
ahead
wow, this
and
is a huge change. I was told it would be, at least 45 minutes to an hour.
well, that is true when we have the entire service at the graveside.
Oh.
But since we have the service inside here, the last portion is really just the burial.
Oh, thank
So
God.
it'll be very quick.
This is so much better than,
Oh, good.
Well,
That's
I
why Stephen and I decided to have a chapel service here so that you could be as comfortable as possible.
oh, that will work.
Yeah.
You come? I mean, what choice we have? Oh, that's much better, and the sun is out.
Does anyone want to say anything in the microphone to your friends and family before
I
I?
think we're gonna arrive there in 15 minutes.
Yeah, let them know I'm gonna set up again at the cemetery.
Okay, so they're gonna set up again at the cemetery. And Joya, is it gonna be the same Zoom link?
It'll be the same exact thing, yep.
Okay, so I guess we have about a
And then
15 to 20 minute break.
Yeah,
roughly?
It'll probably take about 20 minutes to get to the cemetery with all the snow.
Okay.
And then just a couple of minutes for me to set up there, so.
Okay, so I think we're looking at probably 25 minutes. We're gonna drive out for 15 minutes, take 5 to 10 minutes to get things set up, and then the same Zoom link should allow you guys to watch the burial, which is gonna go on for about 10 minutes. So I'll have my cell phone on if you guys need to get hold of me.
Yeah, that is more doable than anything I've heard about.
Good. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and, get my snow boots on and get ready to leave, and then I'll check in with everyone outside before I go to make sure everyone's ready.
So the whole situation from now and the end of, there will be, what, about an hour then?
You know, I bet we'll probably be done within 45 minutes.
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. So I will stay, as long as I'm comfortable.
Okay, yeah.
Based on
When
how-
we're at the cemetery, we'll probably only be there for about 5, maybe 10.
Oh, so I thought I'll be outside in
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
But it'll just be probably all done 45 minutes.
so, okay.
So I would say, if you want to use the restroom, and then get your warm stuff on, and we'll all meet outside by our cars, and then we'll get out of here in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you.
Of